Good afternoon, my name is Michael Kaptug and I will talk about my presentation of the book Miss Smilla's Feeling for Snow. And the idea that is related to the topic Nordic colonialism is a great layer of Greenlandic culture and how it was erased by the Danes. The novel tells a lot about the Greenlandic culture and how the Danes, the colonizers, weakened this culture or erased it. And while reading, you understand how little you know about Greenland, and probably you start thinking that Greenland's culture was intentionally hidden or erased from the minds of the Danes. And to understand what extent of Greenlandic culture was hidden or erased, you need to see this cultural layer reflected on the pages of the novel. Um, when you read the novel, so the title of the book itself has the keyword, and the keyword is snow. In the language of the indigenous people of Greenland, there are 17 words to describe different colors of snow. So it's not only white, but they have 17 colors, 17 words to describe how white snow is, as well as there are different words to describe different colors or states of ice, and we get to know about these words on the pages of the novel. Then in this novel, we also get to know about different Greenlandic dialects and uh, and the background of those who speak them. As the proof of this fact, we read on page 132 of the novel the sentence, "In every human utterance lies the sum total of that person's linguistic past." And this sentence is taken from the episode when Miss Smilla is talking to the curator, and they listen to the tape, and the curator is talking about the type of Greenlandic language of the dialect that that person of the tape is using. Then he also talks to Miss Smilla and tells a lot about her past, in what part of Greenland she was born. Uh, so she was moved to Denmark, what type of Danish dialect she's talking about. So this is the proof of this utterance. A very symbolic person for this novel is Smilla's mother, and she is the reflection of Greenlandic national traits. On page 67 of the novel, we get to know that she got everything she wanted in exchange for the rare birds that she sold to the colonizers of the Danes. And here we observe the interest of the Nordic colonizers, which was to get these birds and sell further to Germany or the USA. And we can suppose that the colonizers forced the locals to develop the ability to adapt themselves to the colonizers' needs. By leading this politics, Smilla's mother replied to the European pragmatism with her own pragmatism. This is the key for understanding the Greenlandic personality trait, the ability to accommodate yourself to the necessary needs of a different culture. So this episode is the dialogue of the colonizer and the colonized ones. And this fact is reflected in Kirsten Thisted's article on page 153, where we can read that Greenlanders' individual successes vary with their abilities to navigate intercultural encounters and manipulate the self-absorbed Europeans, who are often fatally slow to recognize how feeble their grasp of the Greenlandic environment really is. We also learn about other traits of Greenlandic culture, such as the distance is measured in scenic, or the amount of nights that you sleep before reaching to a particular point. You get to know that nobody in Greenland asked about somebody's job because you needed to do all types of jobs. We get to know about the Greenlandic ways of fighting depression. We get to know about the Greenlandic scenario for the coming end of the world, which is related to the coming cold, and this is logical because Greenland is a very cold place. But then you start wondering why this great layer of culture is not talked about in mass media or taught at schools, and probably you start wondering what had happened that had led that it is mostly Danish culture, language, and cities that are widely presented in the world, but not Greenlandic language, traditions, or geography. And the answer is Nordic colonization. Greenland was colonized in a number of ways. In Korkanen's article, you read about different types of violence, and Greenland has experienced certain types of violence, such as structural violence. On page 20, we read of the novel, we read that the Eskimo who suffer hugely from alcohol abuse, and it is Denmark that smuggles alcohol to Greenland, and we read about it on pages 253 and 254 of the novel. As a result, even the current generation of the Eskimo are in huge dependency on Denmark as the country of alcohol supplier. And in Kokonen's article on page 28, we read the following sentence. Structural violence is largely hidden from view as the structure imposed by the dominant societies has been accepted and is used. And as the proof of this sentence, on page 105 of the novel, so we can find traces of structural violence. So from 1960s, Greenland wasn't more called the colony, but as Denmark's northmost territory, and the Inuit were called Northern Danes. But this was done for everybody's appeasement. In reality, it was a tricky plan by Denmark to spread its influence over Greenland and get benefits from it. And these benefits were the following. Denmark was interested in spreading Danish around Greenland, and while teaching the language, the Danish language, the cleverest Greenlandic kids were taken to Denmark, where they were offered to get a degree and opportunities to change their life. And the evidence of the presence of structural violence in this case is that emigration of the most talented children to Denmark definitely benefited for Denmark, but made a negative impact on Greenland because these talents couldn't benefit for the native country. And moreover, once Greenlandic children started gradually to forget their native language and more use Danish in the communication. So by creating the visage of political correctness, Denmark was hiding violence and pursued its clear pragmatic goals. And the so-called political correctness reflects the Stalo in Troy Sturfield's article on page 116, where the Stalo are presenting themselves in the guise of helpers or friends, but in reality they are cunning and trick others. And it is reflected in the words, the style of diversity whose flowery words promise inclusion and tolerance and sometimes succeed in lulling us to inattentiveness and complacency. So the main reason for why this novel is relevant for understanding the topic neo-colonialism is the idea that one culture, Danish in particular, superseded initially and by force the Greenlandic one. The next question is, of course, how this colonization happened and that force was used. So in Philip Morgan's article, so moving the best Greenlandic children to Denmark led also to the erasing of the national identity of the Greenlanders and turning them into Danes. And in Morgan's article on page 43, he writes about ontological imperialism, which is all about engaging native peoples in a form of cultural appropriation in which otherness vanishes and becomes part of the same. And the proof is found on page 242 of the novel, where we read about life in a boarding school in Qaanaaq, where students experienced European comfort in the form of getting access to water by opening the faucet. The meals was served. They got daily baths. Their clothes were washed every other day, and so on. So Greenlandic children started step by step losing skills of working for something they really needed. They wanted, or they were waiting for somebody to do all these things for them. So comfort gave them everything. So by getting used to comfort, children started expecting that there would come somebody, right, and do something for them. So they lost their natural ability to work for themselves. So how and why can this novel benefit from being read through a perspective of neo-colonialism? So the sad awakening of the fact that one's comfortable life is paid by somebody, when someone is living a life full of comfort, they often don't even think where this comfort comes from and at what price it comes, and who stands behind the provision of this comfort. So on page 72 of the novel, we read about the residential area in Copenhagen, which is full of lights and happy people, and on the other side there are two gloomy laboratory buildings. So this depression. So we read that then in these two buildings position themselves as Denmark's relationship to its former colony, right, which is expressed through such words as disillusionment, resignation. So the question is where this comfort comes from. If we take Copenhagen with its lights, right, you need resources to get electricity. And if you look at point C here, Denmark took control over Greenland's resources. We read about it in the novel through retaining its administrative grip, which is expressed through control over foreign policy, mineral rights. So to provide electricity, resources were needed, and these resources were taken from Greenland. So we can make a conclusion that Nordic countries, which are famous for their highly comfortable standard of life, intentionally hide the sources which provide this high standard of life, and by doing so, they intentionally don't allow their citizens to think even in the slightest way of what has taken their life to such a high standard. And this fact is reflected in Troy Sturfier's article on page 117, where you read that the great metropolitan centers of Europe, centers whose urban modernities in fact depend on colonization. So we can make the final conclusion that Greenland was colonized in a number of ways, but these ways are still professionally hidden from the common eye, and only by reading the scientific articles and fiction you will be able to get an insight into this colonization. Thank you.